Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and today I'm looking at, these rather intricately designed dice that are available from Shapeways. They're designed by a guy called Avandius, who, he makes a bunch of different dice sets, and this is the Steampunk Die Set. Now, the reason why I'm doing this, the reason why I ended up doing this was I made the Jebediah Kerman video a few months ago, if you remember, and Shapeways kind of like that, and they basically said that if I wanted to make any videos about any of their stuff, then they would send me it for free. So obviously this is a ploy by them to get free advertising. I made a point that I wasn't going to do anything that didn't have some real story, some real meat behind it. So I came up with this. This is a set of dice that would be used in traditional paper and pen role-playing games. Now, many of you may be too young to remember the days when role-playing game actually meant a paper and pen affair, such as Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu. Back then, 30 plus years ago, the kind of storytelling you could get from a computer really wasn't up to the same kind of face-to-face storytelling you could get with a group of friends, where one person was the dungeon master or the games master administering the rules. Even nowadays, computers can only deal with so much. If you decide to go off script, then things start to go weird, and a lot of fun glitches generally in games where you start to really go off script. Whereas with a person, they could see you going off script and they could react, and sometimes the best games happened when people went really off script. Anyway, these games really like to have intricate rule systems with all sorts of numbers that would be decided by rolling dice. And when you've got all sorts of interesting rules, you would need lots of random number generators. So these dice represent the ability to generate random numbers in various ranges. So we have a 4-sided dice, 6-sided dice, 8-sided dice, 12-sided, 20-sided, a 10-sided, and this is called a decader, right? So the idea is you can roll these two together, and this will generate any number from 0 to 99, or 1 to 100, depending upon how you normalize your series. But yeah, you would have various dice for doing different things. I remember, I think in Dungeons and Dragons, this would be, you would roll a 4-sided dice, and you would get the number at the top to see that I did 1 point of damage with my dagger. Whereas if I had, say, a much heavier sword, I would roll an 8-sided dice and I would say I've just done 6 points of damage to the orc. Yes, I played these things for a little while when I was younger, before really getting into computer games and everything. But so these are made of metal. Now you can buy them as a plastic set where they're made of a much more traditional plastic process. But I find the metal process interesting. I specifically went out of my way to get the metal versions, which are actually pretty expensive. They're about $80, I think, a set, whereas the regular plastic ones are about $20. I'm not sure on that price exactly, but I'll put a link in the description. So the process by which these are made is similar to a lot of 3D printing processes, but there's a few interesting differences. So what we start out with is a layer of stainless steel dust, which is kept warm, incidentally, so it doesn't clump, right? They have a print head which runs over it and prints down adhesive to hold whatever's in the correct layer together. Then after that, you have a set of heating lamps that run over to make sure that the material, the glue, has set. Once that's happened, you have a roller come over that basically throws down another layer of this stainless steel dust, and the process continues, and you build the thing up one layer at a time. You see, this is layer edge on. You can't see any layering here, but if you turn around to the 6-sided dice, you can see the layering in great detail there. So generally the layers are a fraction of a millimeter thick, and this thing would take about 100 layers to do. After that, they're not done. What they do is they have to take it out and blow off the dust which hasn't been glued, and that's where you get the cavities, the voids from. And of course, that's one of the great things about 3D printing, is you can get all these voids. After that, the material itself is still rather porous, and so what they have to do is fill in the material. It acts kind of like a sponge. What they do is they'll put it in a kiln with some other powdered metal, generally bronze, and what they'll do is they'll heat it up enough that the bronze will melt, and then this kind of is a sponge, and it sucks it all up and fills in all those cavities, and you end up with a material that is quite strong enough to be rolled around the ground all the time as you're battling the Witch Lord of Angmar or something. Oh wait, no, the Witch King. Well, regardless, though that would be Lord of the Rings, and I don't remember that being a particular good game other than for having lots of background material. Role-playing games really delighted in providing acres and acres of background material without actually having to write a story about all the spaceships they designed. It's quite a lot of fun, actually. So after that, I think they can then plate these. You can actually get these gold-plated if you like. These are the nickel-plated versions, I believe. I don't actually remember. But the other interesting thing about this beyond role-playing games is, of course, that these bottom 5 represent the 5 Platonic Solids, which have all sorts of cool stuff associated with them. They're obviously named after Plato, ancient Greek philosopher, but many of them were actually known before this date. If you go up to Skara Brae, which is one of the oldest Neolithic sites in the world, they found regular polyhedra which were carved from stone, as I understand it. Although it didn't seem that they had any particular love for, any other shapes. It's just that they thought, oh, look, I can make a, octahedron or whatever. I don't remember exactly which ones. I've just seen some wonderful pictures of amazing stonework. So yeah, these are the 5 Platonic solids. This is a tetrahedron, a cube, an octahedron, a dodecahedron, and an isosahedron. And Plato actually had this interesting idea that the universe was actually made up of microscopic versions of these, which he, of course, thought were atoms, his version of atoms. But his atoms were actually associated with 4 classical elements. There was earth, air, fire, and water, right? And he kind of said, well, obviously fire, well, this has kind of pointy, sharp bits, and if you stab it into your hand, it hurts. That's clearly fire. The cube, I believe, was supposed to be earth, right? Because that's the only thing you can tessellate space with perfectly, so therefore if you want something solid, it has to be made of a cube. The octahedron was supposed to be air, right? And the water was the isosahedron, because if you put it in your hand, it kind of flows out of it very easily. It rolls around. This one, the dodecahedron, well, they didn't really have any clue what that was. Aristotle later added the notion of the ether, but he never explicitly associated it with the dodecahedron. Now, this notion that these were kind of fundamental building blocks of nature, they kind of kept coming back through the years. And if you go forward, a couple of thousand years to Kepler, well, one of Kepler's early models for the solar system tried to fit the distances to the planets based around the Platonic solids. And there's a great illustration in the Mysterium Cosmographicum where he tries to demonstrate that the distances to the planets can be defined by these things sitting inside nested spheres. Now, he eventually abandoned this because he couldn't really make it work. But of course, later on, Kepler went on to come up with Kepler's laws, and he realized how the planets move around the solar system. He didn't know why they moved like that. He just figured out the velocity and distance relationship in the motion around the sun. And of course, Isaac Newton ultimately went on to figure out how the law of gravity was driving that. But, Kepler, this is where he started in his model of the solar system, which is why it's pretty darn cool. So yeah, these are, as I said, the Avandius. They're the Steampunk Dice Set. As you see, the beautiful little gears on the sides of all of these. They can get them all from Shapeways.com, or you can only get a couple of them. I'm probably not going to be playing with these because I don't really play those games anymore, but they're cool enough that I'm going to put them on display. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.